and thank you for scheduling this nomination for Cindy Marten for Deputy Secretary of Education. Ms. Marten, welcome, and thank you for the time we spent together this morning and for the rare opportunity to have your mother and your son there. That was a real treat for me. Earlier this month, I supported Dr. Cardona's nomination to be Secretary of Education because I felt he had the background, qualifications, and temperament to serve in that position. Most importantly, he testified that we need to get kids back into the classroom and demonstrated an understanding that one-size-fits-all mandates from Washington won't work. He also committed to be transparent and responsive to Congress when exercising our oversight responsibilities. So I'm pleased to be able to support his nomination and provide my consent. And I'm glad to see that the CDC has finally caught up with the science on school reopening. I can't help but wonder if we all had Susan Collins to thank for that with her very effective line of questionings last week at the COVID hearing. Ms. Marten, you've been nominated to serve as Deputy Secretary of Education. Under the Government Performance and Results Modernization Act of 2010, the Deputy Secretary serves as Chief Operating Officer for the department. As such, the Deputy Secretary acts on behalf of the Secretary when senior department leaders in developing and executing executive management and in identifying key organizational vulnerabilities and executing effective approaches to manage risk across the department's programs, grants, loans, contracts, and related services. If confirmed as COO of the department, you'd be responsible for the operation and management of approximately 4,000 employees, a $73.5 billion annual budget, and a $1.6 trillion student loan portfolio. Your experience as a teacher and a principal, and since 2013 as superintendent of the San Diego Unified School District, which annually receives millions of dollars from various federal K-12 programs, certainly gives you experience implementing a number of programs that ultimately report into the Deputy Secretary's office. You might be possibly the best possible Assistant Secretary of Elementary and Secondary Education in the history of the agency. However, your record as superintendent highlights the challenges I think you'll have should you be the deputy. In particular, you appear to have little or no experience working in higher education systems or institutions, working on higher education policy, or managing large student loan portfolios. I recall several questions to officials in the last administration about their experience managing a $1 trillion student loan program, so I assume those questions will be asked of you today. Your immediate predecessor had experience not only as a state superintendent of education, but as a college president, and had a long and distinguished career in the U.S. Army as a brigadier general and chief of staff of the Army Reserve Command. President Obama's first nominee confirmed in this position came to it with significant experience managing multi-billion-dollar grant portfolios and investment funds. And George W. Bush's first nominee confirmed to this position had been a CEO and served in the H.W. Bush administration as chief financial officer for the department. All of these former deputy secretaries brought significant experience and expertise in areas such as management, finance, and higher education that complemented the largely K-12 backgrounds of the secretaries they served. So, despite any reservations, I believe your passion for education and for kids to learn in the classroom will enable you to succeed in the position of Deputy Secretary of Education. I very much want you to succeed. I'm inclined to support your nomination. I want to extend to you an offer to provide whatever assistance I and my staff can to help you succeed. Having said that, as a ranking member, it's important for me to point out some things. I'd like to point out to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, because I firmly believe that if Ms. Marten were a Republican or was being nominated by a Republican president, they'd line up in opposition against you. First, I don't believe my colleagues on the other side of the aisle would support a Republican nominee who was superintendent of a school district with large disparities on how minority and white students were disciplined. According to an article in the Los Angeles Times in 2018-19 school year, black students in San Diego Unified were suspended more than 3 times as often as white students, and they accounted for 18% of the students suspended, despite making up only 8% of the student body. Second, I don't believe my colleagues on the other side of the aisle would support a Republican nominee who disability advocates claimed has been, and I quote, difficult to deal with in terms of transparency and sharing information with families of students with special needs, as Disability Rights California claimed about you. In fact, your district's been sued for denying students with accommodations reimbursements they are entitled to receive under their individual education plans, or IEPs. And your district's been investigated by the Federal Department of Education for civil rights violations against students with disabilities. Third, I think my colleagues would vigorously question a Republican nominee who oversaw a school district where top-level administrators were trained on how to delete emails from the public record in violation of state public records laws, as local news reports have claimed occurred in your school district. And furthermore, they'd be skeptical about a nominee whose San Diego Society of Professional Journalists gave the San Diego Unified its Wall Award, given to public officials or agencies that most ignored media requests or otherwise compromised public's right to know. The journalist noted that the San Diego Unified withheld documents about student safety and missing inventory items that other school districts delivered in weeks and ignored repeated requests to meet in person. Fourth, I'm sure that you would express concerns about a nominee heading a school district that was currently defending itself against a lawsuit filed by former students alleging that the district was negligent for failing to take appropriate action upon receiving sexual harassment complaints against its employees. Or a nominee facing a lawsuit seeking the nominee's termination as superintendent due to their alleged neglect and bullying of previous victims of sexual abuse. Finally, I can picture the letter demanding testimony from the local NAACP that not only publicly opposed such a nomination, but stated that the nominee has, I quote, been an ineffective leader of California's second largest school district and is ill-equipped for the tremendous responsibility of serving the needs of your entire nation's young learners. NAACP San Diego branch president Francine Maxwell has gone so far as to express she is greatly disturbed by the prospect of Superintendent Marten being elevated to a position of national significance and import while leaving some of the country's most vulnerable children in increasingly difficult situations. So I'm glad to see that my Democratic friends have abandoned their guilty upon nomination stance that they've taken for the last 4 years. And I hope they will reflect on the damage they did to the Senate by opposing any and all nominees, basically just because they accepted a nomination from the last president. Now, I've had an opportunity to sit down with you and to understand a lot of what's behind some of the things that as ranking member I have to point out because they're in the news. I hope you take this opportunity to help the committee understand your background, your experience, your record of work, and the fact that it does merit a promotion. And I hope you're able to convince my Democratic friends that they should support you as well. We need you at the Department of Education. We need you as a chief operating officer. And I'm convinced from your background and your passion, those places that you identify you have deficiencies, you'll reach out and find a way to overcome those gaps. Madam Chairman, I look forward to this hearing, and I thank the chair.